Hello friends, I'm Ashish Darbari, founder and CEO of Aximize, and to our new listeners, welcome, and to our old ones, welcome back. And I'm proud to say that today I have Bob Smith, Executive Director at ESD Alliance in-house. Hello Bob, how are you?
Hey Ashish, I'm great. How are you doing?
Hey, so good to see you, man. Thank you very much for joining us today for a chat. I'm very much looking forward to finding out what is ESD Alliance up to. But you know what, Bob? Before we get into the details of ESD, I want to know a bit more about you. What is your personal journey? Where were you born, and how did you get into science, semiconductors, and the like? What is your backstory?
Okay. Well, actually, I was born in Berkeley, California, so I have literally lived in the Bay Area pretty much my whole life.
Nice.
Except for my stint at UC Davis, which is out in the Central Valley. But yeah, that's a great question. I was one of these kids that was always building things. I mean, at a very young age, and mostly electronics, things like that.
Right. So you were basically naturally a DIY person from a very...
Yeah, really. Yeah, just very curious. And I was lucky that my father encouraged that. He'd buy me kits and stuff.
Sure.
I think he always wanted me to be a doctor, but by the time I got old enough, I said, no way, I'm going to do something in electronics.
So you said you went to UC Davis, and is that where you did your undergraduate education?
Did my undergrad there and was fortunate enough to be hired by Hewlett-Packard right out of school.
Sure.
Went to HP. They put me through Stanford to get my master's. That was a great program. So you could do that while you were working there. And learned a lot about what I didn't know. Going out of the theory of electronics that you learn in college, and then you go work for a company that's making stuff that they have to manufacture and sell and support.
Yeah.
You learn very quickly that there's a whole lot more to it than
that gets taught.
Just circuit theory
that gets taught in the university. So you worked with HP for how many years then? Before.
I was with HP for about 5 years.
5 years.
Actually, no, I take that back. About 4 years.
4 years, I see. So how did you transition into ESD Alliance, and at what point did you join?
So that's a great question. So after HP, I was interviewing at one of the semiconductor companies.
Right.
American Microsystems. They were in Santa Clara. This was in a day when everybody had their own fabs. And I went in there to interview for an engineering job, and I got kind of hijacked by, as it turned out later to be their VP of marketing and sales, who brought me to his office and said, I looked at your background, you need to be in business. You need to be in marketing. And I kind of said, I don't know anything about that. I really didn't, just had no clue. And he said, don't worry, I'll teach you. So that was where I made if I look back on it, a huge pivot. It still leveraged my technical background in a big way, but I learned the whole business side from this guy.
So which year was this, Bob? When was this?
This would have been probably late 79.
Right.
Yeah, so I'd been out of school, 4 years. I'd been at HP 4 years. I literally went from getting my diploma to working in the lab at HP in under 2 weeks, I think.
Wow.
Sometimes I regret that I didn't take some time off. But
who wants to take time off when you're getting exciting opportunities, eh?
Yeah.
So tell us about what exactly is the ESD Alliance, and I'm not sure everybody knows about ESD Alliance.
Sure.
And what is your role in ESD Alliance? I mean, I know you have the title of Executive Director,
right?
But are you the top man in the show? Are you running everything in ESD Alliance?
Well, I'm the point person. So maybe it'd help if I just give a very quick history.
Sure.
So way back in 1989, Cadence, Mentor, and Synopsys emerging big EDA companies got together and decided that they should have an industry association. And they formed a group called EDAC, which was the Electronic Design Automation Consortium. And two things significantly happened out of that. One is EDAC became a co-sponsor of the Design Automation Conference. They also started the Phil Kaufman Award, which is a prestigious award in our industry that we give to every year to somebody who's made, big lasting contributions. And they also started the Market Statistics Service, which I can talk about later, but that's our report that tracks where the industry is going.
Trends, very valuable,
Yeah. So now fast forward to a market has evolved and changed. And in 2015, I got a call asking if I'd be interested in getting, involved in trying to, in a sense, kind of restructure and reinvigorate this group. And so I did, and there were, frankly, just three of us, me and two other people in this group. So a very small organization. And one thing that struck me, and the reason that we are now called the Electronic System Design Alliance, was that the world's not just about EDA anymore. Look at what's going on in IP. And, look, ARM is one of our members. Well, I talked to Simon and he would tell me, well, we're not an EDA company. We're an IP company.
Yes.
And so in looking at what was going on, sometimes I talk about it as we've left what I call the chip-centric world and we're now in the system-centric world. So, and I think, back in the day, the whole objective of the industry in the early days was tape out. You have to get to tape out. And then, now start another project. It's really not the same today. I think engineering groups are much more focused on product.
That's right.
Make sure it all works. Anyway, we changed the name to Electronic System Design Alliance to really open it up, so we could get more people interested and involved, because we had the perception was that we were only about EDA. And clearly, we're still working on that, but I think most people understand. If you look at our membership, we're pretty broad. And then, kind of in parallel with making that change, I started talking to Semi. They had approached. We were actually at one point renting some office space from them, and they started talking to me. And they started explaining that their mission, had evolved their mission from being basically a trade group for the semiconductor manufacturing and materials industry.
Right.
That they were really looking out the whole electronic product chain from the beginning, design, all the way through manufacturing and distribution. And just started saying, well, maybe we should cooperate. We know design is important, but we don't have anybody here that really understands it or is involved in it. And that led probably to 2 years almost of discussion that ended up in us becoming part of Semi, essentially being acquired.
Sure. So what I find quite interesting is the way you described this. So right in 89, EDA was quite important, the main driver of the market. And that was when you had the Intels and the AMDs and the IBMs dominating the market, and not so much an IP-driven ecosystem, not the partner ecosystem that ARM developed, and or I would say developed around ARM. And I would even add other IP companies like Imagination Technologies and Marvell. And what you're saying is slowly the industry was moving from an EDA focus to a chip focus to a system focus, which is about covering all sorts of industries. Because it's not just the EDA or an IP company or even an OEM, because you also have lots of services companies that are linked into this ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's all a combined market force now that is working hopefully in a synchronized, harmonious way to facilitate, and which is what I think ESD Alliance is trying to do, is to bring in competing companies. Yeah. This is fascinating.
Yeah, so EDA, EDA is tremendously important, but a really interesting kind of visual statistic. If one looks at our MSS newsletter, Market Statistics Service, anybody can download that from our website. We have one chart that tracks over the last, I think it goes back 20 years, the various segments like front end design, back end place and route, IP.
Yeah.
IP goes from almost 20 years ago to it is in the latest report. I think it is the leading category in terms of revenue. So it shows you, wow, there's been a complete shift from hand designing circuits, at the cell level to actually grabbing these big functional blocks.
That's right. And there's a whole trend in the industry moving to high level languages and more emphasis on high level language design for even bigger IP blocks. So let me actually bring in a question that I was thinking of asking with you. So, the RISC-V development is quite significant in the last 5 years. It's even gaining more pace than, in fact, Aximize recently joined RISC-V as well. And it's a very interesting model. It's not a first of its kind because Linux has clearly been our precursor. But for semiconductor industry, it's really the first of its kind to encourage open source. How do you think it's going to exercise pressures, positive or negative, on the work that ESD Alliance is trying to do? I only see positive pressures, actually. I don't see any negative pressures, but you might be able to comment more on how do you see these, because there's quite a big ecosystem of RISC-V members in the foundation.
I'll be honest, I actually see it as a big positive. I think that, and it's somewhat of a controversial topic, but the whole topic, I think, of open source is very interesting. Now, the reality is, though, that there's no such thing as a free lunch. And if, let's go, and you mentioned Linux, which is something I like to mention a lot, is it is very exciting. But look at the sizes of the businesses that have capitalized on that. And having the open source is great, but you need the infrastructure.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of work going into that with on the RISC-V side. In fact, that's probably, and people say, or will ask me, well, ARM's one of your members, what do they think? ARM, look how long it's taken ARM is a juggernaut. ARM is a huge leader, and look how long it's taken for them to build that ecosystem and that infrastructure. It is it's not something that you can, magically make happen in a year or two. It takes time. And especially in semiconductors, there's so much inherent risk, especially the more complex and the bigger the project that goes. And so, and one thing we can say, I think, about most engineers is they have a lot of inertia. There's usually, once you get used to designing some way or doing something, it's hard to move them to change because they know what works. And once you go beyond the dotted line of the boundary, there's a lot of potential risks there. But I do think for us, RISC-V is a good thing because it potentially is broadening the design ecosystem. It's potentially going to bring more designs to market. In fact, I think another way to look at it is how does it help the existing vendors? Well, I think if it creates more ideas, more new designs, well, that means all the vendors that supply the design industry benefit because, at some point you're going to need, if you're doing test chips at some older node, maybe you can get by with kind of the tools that come with RISC-V. But if you're going to be doing a leading edge system, you are going to need the best tools to do that.
And I think the pressures of verification are enormous. And I was just talking to Harry Foster towards the end of last year, and he mentioned in the Wilson Research report that the processor verification status is 5-to-1 verification to design headcount. And if you look at some of the other reports in his other findings in his report, which is 68% of the ASIC projects are failing in their first attempt, and the same number is actually running behind schedule.
Wow.
And if you look, and it goes back to what you just said. It's the inertia in the engineers not being able to adapt as fast as we collectively need to. And going back to your observation on ARM and how long it has taken the ARM company and its ecosystem to adapt and settle down to the best practices of 5G
Yeah.
design. I see in RISC-V there is tremendous growth and tremendous opportunities. And I was talking to Calista Redmond at the beginning of the year, and I asked her, what challenges do you see? And it's a very interesting perspective she brought in, and she didn't even mention any significant challenge, and all of it was opportunities. And it is quite nice to actually see that, but I can already begin to see that verification would become a big deal, if RISC-V ecosystem needs to thrive and grow at the pace at which we all want it to grow. So
I completely agree, and I would agree with, without even knowing that it makes complete sense. Harry Foster saying that 5 verification engineers to designers
for processor, actually.
I mean, it's just huge. It's really verification is an unbounded problem, actually.
Yeah, and I think the more because we focus on formal verification, and I tend to look everything from a very logical point of view, because that's what happens if you do requirements-oriented verification for 20 years. For a lot of things that I see them as very simple and common sense oriented. And I also come across the real human beings in designers and verification engineers. And you sometimes see, it's obvious to me, it's obvious to them. And they can appreciate, they're empathetic to this change, but they need time. They need to sleep over it. They need to do it a few times before they can make that change happen, which is all natural and positive, to be honest. So how many...
Can I just interject one more? Because we're kind of talking about scales.
Yeah.
The other one area that I would like to see our alliance get more involved in is software embedded.
Yes, absolutely.
If we think, I just think about a smartphone, and okay, there's billions of transistors in there. But think about all the stuff that orchestrate, all the software that has to orchestrate all of that activity to make it into a usable product. Absolutely. So this is a complete back of the envelope. Is it probably for every chip designer? I'll bet there are at least 10 software developers.
That is quite true. I would say probably more.
So that's another part of what I consider the ecosystem, but not an area, because of our past as being more of being an EDA organization that then kind of evolved into IP. To me, that would seem like the next logical area where I'd like to see people get involved, because we are all really in the design ecosystem. It's just we're working on different parts of the problem.
Absolutely. So, Bob, how many members do you have currently in the ESD Alliance? Is it?
We have just under 40. I think it's 38, 39.
And you've been seeing a rapid growth in companies joining the alliance.
Well, we've definitely seen over the last 2 years. Yes, it's definitely grown. I will say that being part of SEMI, which we joined SEMI, we became part of SEMI in 2008, the summer of 2018.
Right.
We've always been an international organization, but we've never really, with 3 people, and not a huge budget. All of most of our activity was in North America, with the exception of the Date Show in Europe. We are still a sponsor of that, and DVCon. We have attended that, the Europe DVCon, as well as the one here. But with SEMI now, we have access to their global platform. So we've been able to participate in the semicon shows in China, Taiwan, Japan, and Europe. And we've also been able to talk to more people there. In fact, we just recently had a new company join us, EDA company based in Italy, another one based in Canada, and actually we have 2 or 3 in China now. So we still have a lot of work to do to kind of build the local kind of ground, grassroots following in these areas. Good news is it's growing.
So, when RISC-V Foundation existed in the US and registered in North America, political landscape was changing, policies were changing, and they had to relocate the headquarters in Switzerland. So it's the RISC-V International. And it was quite clear why they were doing it. They justified it. do you believe at some point the same pressures could actually affect the ESD Alliance as to who can actually become a member depending on what is the origin of the country? Do you have even requirements such as that to say we can't actually welcome member companies from certain countries because rules and policies are changing? You've never been caught into that crossfire yet?
No, I have been confronting that question just recently, and I really like. And so I'm not an official semi spokesman, but I kind of went to the execs there to kind of get their view, because semi is truly global. They have members from all over the world,
right?
And they're trying to think how to paraphrase this. Their position is they're not trying to pick winners. They're not trying to create leverage somebody over another, and may the best region and best company win, as long as it's a level playing field and it's fair and it doesn't involve, things that are not good for business, like, theft or copying. So beyond that, they're for raising the global semiconductor industry on a global basis, and, let the best compete, and let the best, let whoever is going to be the best with the expertise, let them do that, as long as it's fair. So to me, that makes good sense.
Yeah. So I have another question for you. So this is related to me trying to understand what exactly ESD Alliance is trying to achieve through its member companies. So, for example, if you look at Accelera, they are pioneering new standards, different member companies working, and then the standard gets formed and gets distributed, and the rest of the industry follows these, whether it's language standards or safety or security. How are you making that change? How are you bringing along members? And what is the actual product or outcome that comes out of this engagement in ESD Alliance?
Sure. Well, I have a great example, which I'll use. So a question that sometimes I get asked is, well, what does a trade association do? And more importantly, why should I care? Why would I want to be part of this? And one of the things that I point out to them is we, among other things that we do, we offer we're a forum where member companies, who are quite often competitors and competing, for market share and mind share and all that, can come together and say, we have a problem in the industry, or we have an issue, and it would be better to address this if we could address it as a group. So being a nonprofit trade group, we can offer the protection for companies to get together and have these discussions. Obviously, they have to be held in a certain way, but to talk about, okay, we have this issue, what can we do about it as a group, and not have to worry about collusion or antitrust or anything like that. I'll briefly mention one area, and then I want to mention another. One would be here in the U.S. export policy and law.
Yeah,
it's a big concern for everybody in our industry, and you can just read the news in the last year, and the entity lists and supply chains. There's a lot of confusion and a lot of concern too. So we have a group committee that helps with that, and it's also now, because we're part of SEMI, that committee also works with SEMI's policy office in Washington, D.C. But another one that I think is a little more tangible is we have a joint development working right now on a new protocol that will be used for preventing software piracy.
Oh, yeah.
So, long story short is EDA software is very expensive, and there's other industries like mechanical design and all these analytical software tools. It turns out that the licensing mechanism is really out of date, and especially in a world of virtual servers and machines. And so this group of three of our biggest members, we started hosting discussions, and they looked around and said, well, we don't see any of the commercial developers developing. They're not working on this. Maybe we should do something. So long story short, it took us a year and a half, 2 years to actually get all the legal agreements put together. But this group, which is we actually have a press release came out on this summer. It's Cadence, Mentor, and Synopsys. Of course, Mentor is now Siemens EDA, so I should say that.
Yeah, Siemens EDA. Yeah.
But they each have representatives. We have a joint development team developing we call it the server certification protocol.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically going to be a recipe for how you can actually just like you can identify a person by their thumbprint.
Mm-hmm.
This will allow you to a very clever way to identify machines well beyond host ID, MAC ID, and all that.
Right.
Yeah. That actually then that will become a SEMI standard. That's another benefit we're getting from being part of SEMI is that they have a very robust standards part of the business. I think they currently manage almost 1,500 different standards in the semiconductor industry. I'm proud to say I met with their team just about a week ago, and this is the first standard in the design area that SEMI will have. And assuming we get there, there's more hard work to be done, but the team is on track. All the big EDA companies want to use this new mechanism in their licensing scheme. So that's an example of something very tangible.
Very tangible, very useful. But actually, the very first thing that you said, and I was almost thinking of United Nations in that sense, is, you're bringing conflict resolution and making sure equal opportunity, companies get a chance to talk to each other, level playing field. That is what was playing up in my mind when you were talking about. So all of these are actually very interesting value propositions, and I'm not sure I was aware about all of these myself before today. So thank you very much for sharing. So you presumably also do events every year. I'm certainly aware that events from ESD Alliance happen. So are you planning events in 2021 this year? Virtual events or?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, let's be honest. I think for everyone, last year was a tough year, and a number of our events we couldn't do them.
Mm-hmm.
But it looks like this year is going to be. This is just my gut take right now. We're going to see more and more of hybrid events, where there's a live portion, but there's also a virtual portion. And of course, I don't have a crystal ball. Nobody does.
Sure.
But
nobody.
Seems like it seems like maybe a good compromise. But in terms of events, we're doing a virtual event next month in February called the Technology Unites Global Summit. It's actually being organized and managed by our SEMI Europe team, but it is for folks all over the world. ESDA will have a virtual booth there.
Excellent.
And we'll have in that booth basically a bunch of information about, who we are, what we do, an intro video. And then we're doing a hosted session, a 1-hour panel discussion that's it'll be pre-recorded in about 2 weeks from now. But
nice.
We've got some very interesting lineup of different people, all from our group, at, different angles on the industry and looking forward. We will be... we're a co-sponsor of the Date Show. We're not actually exhibiting there, but we'll be watching, and that's coming up pretty shortly as well as a virtual show. This summer we have Semicon West and DAC are co-locating in San Francisco. I think that's we're really excited about that. It's each has their own separate market, and that's great. But I think it kind of underscores the fact that we all are part of this bigger semiconductor industry. And I sure hope it's live. Obviously, a contingency, I think, would be that it might be hybrid, but we're hoping for the best that it could be a live show. It's the one, especially for our community, it's kind of the one event per year where a lot of people get together, they network, you see people you haven't seen for a year.
Sure.
Fingers crossed. Also, go ahead.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed, really. We also, unfortunately, had to postpone our Kaufman Award for 2020 simply because we knew we couldn't have the award dinner. That's a big part of it. And so we've rolled all that into 2021. And the way the process works is we wouldn't announce the winner until later in the fall of 2021, and then we'd have the dinner in early 2022.
That might work out fine.
Yeah. However, not so much an event, but I'll add that we're about to roll out an announcement about a new program that will recognize people that have made great contributions to our industry who have passed, who have died, and never received the Kaufman Award, while they were alive. And so we're going to promote those folks via some announcements and webpage and so forth.
Wow, very
so
impressive.
Expect that will be out in about a week, I believe, the press release on that. So
sounds like
we want to keep the Phil Kaufman Award is something very strongly associated with our group. It is a very prestigious award. It's jointly awarded by the ESD Alliance and the IEEE CETA.
I had the privilege to speak to one such awardee, Lucio Lanza, last year.
Oh, you did? Okay, yeah.
So he was one of our guests last year. So it looks like you'll be very, very busy this year. Lots of very different activities and also very valuable.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. I should also add that it's highly likely, of course, highly likely that we'll hope we can be back at SemiCon Taiwan, which is usually in the fall, and hopefully we'll be over that. And that's been a very good event for us. A lot of interest in design there.
Well, if one country is very safe, it is Taiwan, and I think it's going to stay safe. So that sounds very impressive. Tell me one thing, Bob. I often ask my esteemed guest every time I speak to them to give me some tips for a lot of the fresh graduates and new hires who listen to the podcast and find a way to get to know people. But today I want to actually ask you a different question. Do you have any number of tips to give to companies who might want to actually participate in the ESD Alliance? And what is it they can do? Anything that might come to you, young companies, not the big companies that are already actively driving the Alliance. But the ecosystem has got lots of small and medium enterprise companies.
Absolutely.
How can they actually make a difference? How can they benefit? How can they contribute to the ESD Alliance? What would be your take on that?
Well, I'm going to start with you just made me think of two words.
Yeah.
Get involved.
Right.
So an organization like ours is you will get out of it what you put into it and more than what you put into it. So it's I've had this discussion with some companies that are like, well, my boss said I should look at this and, but what's in it for us? And I don't see the ROI and I don't see the value. And I always try to turn it around and say, well, we're strength in numbers. We're representing an industry. You want to be part of something bigger. And the ESD Alliance is a way that you can easily network with your peers, get access to people that you wouldn't ordinarily have to. I mentioned earlier our CEO Outlook event, or maybe I didn't mention it.
No, we didn't talk about that. Yeah, please share.
The CEO Outlook is an annual event we do. Now, we had to do it virtually last year, but we invite all our members to come in. We usually have it around an informal dinner, and then we invite the CEOs of mainly our board members, to do a panel discussion, and we have it hosted. But beauty of it is they're all there for the dinner. They're all there for the cocktail hour. And so it allows, and I've seen this happen, company has just started up and you want to go, meet one of the CEOs that's driving a multi-billion-dollar company. There you are. You're all in the same room. Everybody's very approachable. So this networking aspect, I think, is really, really important. And particularly for the smaller companies, I would say you'll get a lot of data. You'll get a lot of, you'll be able to network. You'll be able to meet people, make new connections. But you can also help and get involved and get on. We have different committees that work on various things. Mm-hmm. It's just a great way to be part of the industry. And it really, truly does open up new avenues to the point where, frankly, our industry, like many others, acquisitions are fairly common, I would say.
Yeah, yeah.
I think a lot of them come from companies that have gotten to know each other, probably some through even through our organization. So I'd really say it's getting involved. And obviously you have to see the value there. But I will say a lot of the small companies, just the things like we do that, we're not lawyers, and we can't, let's say with export policy, we can't tell you, well, you have, here's exactly what to do. We'll never do that. But what we'll do is help steer people, and we'll let them talk to people that can say, well, here's what you should look into to make the best decision for your company. That's been huge for us, because it's a really tricky area. It's hard to know sometimes.
Nice. Very nice. Very, very useful nuggets you've given me today. I'm sure a lot of the people who are listening to this would say, we didn't know about ESD Alliance in this way or that way. So very valuable. Thank you very much for your time, Bob, today. I think it's nearly 36 minutes, so we can wrap up now.
All right. Well, thank you. This is I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to you, and it's great to be able to see you again, as you reminded me in the beginning.
Yeah, I know. As time flies by. I remember sitting with you in a dinner in 2016, and I was thinking one day we'll get a chance to have a chat like this. And here I am now running Aximize and running this podcast. And thank you very much. The pleasure is all mine, Bob. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you. So friends, I hope you liked today's chat. Do let me know at info@aximize.com. Leave your comments in the YouTube, and let's stay in touch. Thank you very much.